Lobries and Gentlegrams, in today's episode of Lobry in Gentleland, just when you thought King Kung Fu Kenny completely cremated the Canadian crybaby courthouse crash-out Karen clown, the bearded balding BBL belligerent buffoon gavel-guzzling Graham gave a grim glance to his legal lapdog, letting him know the lawsuit would lurch forward. Likely this litigious leap lands because every time Drake drops, the chart-crushing Compton commander continues to claim the crown. When the gavel-guzzling Graham gifted the Globe his latest lullaby-laden album, Some Sexy Sleepy Songs for You, the Canadian crybaby caught a crushing curveball. The 4'5" feet whooper King Kung Fu Kenny completely clogged the charts with his 3-month-old masterpiece GNX, blocking every single sleepy serenade from the sexy red stunt double from scraping the summit. So in today's video, we'll crunch the colossal chart conquest the Compton commander carved out this week, critique how the gavel-guzzling Graham grappled with one of the grimmest gaps in his glittering career, we'll clarify whether this clumsy crash from Kendrick against the Canadian is a clear-cut loss for Lobry or a lucky loophole, and finally, we'll comb through the contentious court clash between Drake and his cash-clutching comrades at UMG over Not Like Us. So let's jump into it. It started early last week, just 2 days after Drake released his brand new album. Kendrick's GNX in its 12th week already started racking up more streams, with Some Sexy Sleepy Lullaby Love Songs getting 25.4 million streams on Sunday, 2 days after its release, while GNX on that same day racked up 24.6 million. The gap was small, and it eventually closed and GNX lapped it. The very next day, on Monday, racking up 25.2 million streams, while Some Sexy Sleepy Love Songs only got 24.8. And you'll see throughout this video that they might not still be throwing diss songs at each other, but the battle on the charts between Drake and Kendrick Lamar has never been closer. Which is insane, right? Because before 2025, Drake was the pop star. He's let us know there's plenty of times. Rapping, I just rapped and it went pop, or got the Billboard melodies, rap is something I do on the side, crossed over to the other side and I didn't even have to die. Meanwhile, Kendrick raps how you let a conscious guy go commercial while only making conscious albums. So you can see where both of their intentions lie within this music thing. Drake's main concern is making the hits, and for the past 10 years, he's been the highest selling rapper globally every single year. But even with that massive back catalog of hits, even with Kendrick being the one creating the conscious albums, the battle for highest selling rapper in 2025 is closer than it's ever been, with both Drake and Kendrick Lamar each racking up 2.25 billion streams so far in 2025 on Spotify. For the first time in Kendrick's career, they're basically tied. If they both drop solo projects this year, the battle will only get more intense. And Kendrick outselling Drake this year, after the year that he had last year, will speak absolute volumes to the direction that hip-hop is headed in. We can't count Drake out though just yet, because he's already got the OVHO sweatshop workers and ghostwriters working overtime concocting his solo album, which will likely come out this year. He continues talking about it on tour.
I need everybody to get home safe, because when I come back to Sydney, I need to see all these same faces. I don't want a different crowd. I want to say, I left you for 8 years, and I will never make that mistake again. I got a new album out called Some Sexy Songs for You. I'm gonna work on another album, just me, and then I'll come right back to you and we gonna turn it all over again.
And I don't think he's gonna let Kendrick become the highest selling rapper in the world without a fight. But meanwhile, even 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, Not Like Us, almost a full year after its release, is still breaking insane records, as just this week alone, it earned the biggest international streaming week for a hip-hop song in the history of the Billboard global charts. You think this is just a hit song in LA? Outside of the US, this song racked up over 65 million streams this week alone. The same week, Drake just dropped an album. And on a side note, if you guys forgot, this is something insane to look out for. Kendrick and the creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, have been working on a musical and movie together, which is described to be about seeing the past and present coming to a head when a young black man who is interning as a slave reenactor at a living history museum discovers that his white girlfriend's ancestors once owned his ancestors. Insane storyline, and obviously we know Kendrick is an insane storyteller. If you guys have kept up with South Park, then you know Matt Stone and Trey Parker are some of the greatest storytellers of all time. And just like Kendrick, they're also musically gifted. And this movie is supposed to be accompanied by a musical. It's also expected to be released this summer while Kendrick is on tour, and we know that a second album from Kendrick is probably coming. He's done musicals to movies in the past, like the Black Panther soundtrack, so it could line up that his next solo project is the soundtrack to this movie that he's working on with the South Park creators. And we got a little update about this movie, as it's allegedly supposed to be called Whitney Springs, and a trailer is rumored to be coming out next month, according to a Twitter user by the name of Num Num Juice. Now, how he got to this conclusion was a Twitter account for the movie was created last year, and the only guy following it was a Twitter user by the name of the Insnider. That Twitter account responded to a tweet that said Kendrick Lamar is rumored to have a big surprise for the Super Bowl, and he said maybe it's a trailer for his new movie, which is called, and then he put a quiet emoji. If you look on Twitter, there's an account by the name of Whitney Springs Movie, and the only user they follow is that Insnider Twitter account, who tweeted out that Kendrick would be dropping the trailer for this new movie. Allegedly, the trailer for the movie was supposed to drop during the Super Bowl, but they decided to push it back. But now back to Labrie and his losses on the charts. So, as we can see, the final numbers for the first week of this new Sexy Lullaby Sleepy Love song came out, and it's one of the lowest opening week streams that Drake has ever had on Spotify. These are a look at all the albums he's released during the streaming era. Scorpion had his highest opening week streams with 559 million streams in its first week. CLB also did pretty decent, but you could see there's been a little bit of a decline after Certified Lover Boy, with all the albums he released under his new contract with UMG that he signed in 2022. For All the Dogs, Her Loss, and Honestly Nevermind, they still put up good numbers, but again, we're talking about a guy who signed a $400 million contract with UMG, argued to be the biggest contract in music history. You'll see later that artists like Travis Scott, even Kendrick, J. Cole, they've all beaten some of these Spotify numbers. And I've been saying for a while, like, Kendrick was the catalyst to really put this pressure on Drake's career, but his numbers haven't been the same as they were for the last few years. The decline, not just from a quality perspective, but also a numbers perspective, has been a little bit apparent. And some sleepy songs, this new album was one of the lowest first weeks Drake has ever had in his career, with just 205 million streams. Compare that with For All the Dogs, which had double that at 405 million streams in its first week. And you could say, oh, but this is a collab album. Well, Her Loss did 382 million in its first week. Or you want to say, oh, this isn't hip-hop, it's a different genre. Well, Honestly Nevermind was a dance album, and even that one outstreamed this new album, racking up 212 million streams in its first week. But you still had Akademiks gassed up with these numbers, saying that he spoke to Drake, and Drake is about to talk to us about, all his thoughts on the beef and everything, quoting Drake saying, "My talk soon come." But this was enough for Drake to snag the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 charts with this new album, and ironically, he actually replaced Kendrick, who sold almost as much as Drake did this week with GNX last week in his 12th week of release. After the Super Bowl, it saw a massive spike, selling around 240,000 copies in the 12th week. Meanwhile, in Drake's first week, he's only selling around 240,000 copies. And this is the first time in history that Drake and Kendrick actually swapped spots at the #1 on the Billboard 200. First time in their careers. Talk about some poetic justice. We're going to see this year if Kendrick takes the crown not only within the culture, but also in Drake's residence on the charts. Now, aside from Spotify and just in the US, Drake's new album earned 287 million streams in its first week, which is, again, ironically, the biggest US streaming week for any album since the debut of Kendrick's album, GNX, which had almost 100 million more streams than this Drake album in his first week with 380 million streams. So to put things into perspective, Kendrick with a 12-song album earned almost 100 million more streams than Drake did in his first week with this 21-song album.
It's not enough.
I'm telling you, a shift is happening on the charts. And of course, the Drake fans are going to say it's the bots. We're going to debunk that later in this video, because of course the courthouse Karens have come with their conspiracies. But let's take a look at some of the biggest opening week streams for rappers in the US this decade and see where this new Drake album racks up. Because any of the excuses you want to give it, oh, it's an R&B album, oh, it's a collab album, this isn't the real Drake solo album. This is the first album Drake released after the beef. He was talking on the beef in this album, releasing dance songs, pop songs, rap songs, everything, not just R&B. This album was a statement, and as much bad publicity as Kendrick might have gave him in 2024, this was the biggest rap beef of all time. He just said Drake's name on the Super Bowl stage. That's promotion in and of itself. All eyes were on Drake to see the move he was going to make with this album. That amount of attention alone should have driven up the numbers to be at least something somewhat substantial. And on a side note, I'm now subconsciously saying these alliterations. But yeah, so you could see Drake holds the title for the 3 highest first week streams for a rapper in the US. CLB, Certified Lover Boy, had 700 plus million streams in its first week. For All the Dogs had over 500 mil. Her Loss also had over 500 mil. You got to remember, all these albums are 20 plus song albums, and the more songs your album has, the easier it is to rack up more streams. Kendrick with GNX was a 12-song album, and that still ended up being the 7th highest streaming album in its opening week in the US this decade with 379 million streams first week. You also had Mr. Morale there, which, if you're going to say Drake's album was R&B, it was a little harder to digest. It wasn't for the radio, it wasn't for the streams or TikTok. Then, what was Mr. Morale? That definitely was not tailored to the charts, but that still racked up 343 million streams in its first week. Utopia, The Offseason, even future Metro Boomin's project, We Don't Trust You, Lil Baby's project, It's Only Me, all of these albums racked up more streams in their first week than Drake and PARTYNEXTDOOR's new album did.
It's not enough.
So again, you could say this is a collab album, but the point is the numbers, while they're not bad, are not where Drake once was. CLB came out at the beginning of the decade, and that did more than 3 times the amount of streams in its first week than Drake did with this new album. Now, we got some more insane stats showing how Kendrick has been destroying Drake on the charts over the last few weeks, but before we get into that, I had a bunch of you guys tell me that you already started making money off this, so I want to tell the rest of you guys about something that almost seems too good to be true, alright? Let me give you a little glimpse into my life. When I'm not making this content for you guys, I have a disgusting addiction to my phone. My daily screen time is higher than Drake on that album cover, higher than Snoop off the edibles. So if you guys suffer that same addiction as me, I want to put you onto something that's going to change your life. FreeCash.com is a program that partners with mobile games that are looking for more users to play their games, and they will literally pay you to play their games for free. All you got to do is sign up using the QR code you see on the screen or using the link in the description of this video. You make an account super easy. All you got to do is put in your email, create a password, verify your email, and then you're good to go. And they got a bunch of games. My favorite is the Monopoly Go because we're always on the go trying to make some money. Once you make an account, you just click the game you want to play, follow the directions that they give you. The directions are super easy. Usually you just got to download the game and start playing. So it's about time you put that phone addiction to good use. Again, use the QR code you see on the screen or the link in my description. Create an account and you could start making more than $150 just to play a game on your phone. So we looked at the first week numbers for this new Drake album, and again, emphasizing that Kendrick's GNX has been absolutely clobbering it on the charts. But it's not just that new Drake and Party album that GNX is destroying, because GNX now becomes the second fastest selling rap album of the 2020s decade, surpassing Drake's album For All the Dogs. Again, For All the Dogs was like 23 songs, more than double or almost double the amount of GNX.
It's not enough.
GNX is at almost 2 billion streams on Spotify in its first 3 months alone, getting to these milestones a lot faster than any of the recent new Drake albums in the last few years. In the last decade. You can also see that there's a couple rap albums that have had several weeks where they've sold 100,000 copies each week in the US. And this week, Kendrick breaks another Drake record as GNX becomes the rap album with the most weeks selling over 100,000 units in the US this decade. It sold over 100,000 units in a week for 6 weeks, while Certified Lover Boy, Drake's biggest album this decade, only doing that 5 weeks. And if you break it down, that's a crazy achievement, right? Most artists struggle to sell 100,000 units in their first week, let alone doing that 6 weeks in a row. That's an accomplishment that only the Taylor Swifts or the Morgan Wallens hit. You can see here it's very rare for a rapper to achieve this. Pop Smoke did this with his posthumous album. That's an amazing project, by the way. Utopia also by Travis Scott, For All the Dogs. Juice WRLD with his posthumous album. Each of them sold over 100,000 units in a week for 4 different weeks. GNX is the first and only album to do so 6 different weeks. And you can see the streams for each song off GNX are going crazy. Luther having already over 500 million streams since its release. TV Off is the second biggest song off the album, then Squabbled Up, Whacked Out Murals, Hey Now, which is probably my personal favorite off the project, Reincarnated with almost 100 million streams so far. That really emphasizes Kendrick's line of how you let a conscious guy go commercial while only making conscious projects and songs. And on a side note, go show more love to Gloria, because that's one of the best songs off this project and also one of the lowest streamed songs off the album, which is insane to me. Once him and SZA do that song on their tour, the streams will definitely go up for that song. And you can see the growth for this album is crazy. Like, Travis Scott's Utopia, which was one of the biggest projects in this entire decade. GNX has had 3 months on the charts. It's only been released for 3 months. When Utopia was only released for 3 months, its streams were way lower than GNX, with his highest streaming song being I Know with less than 200 million streams. Luther already has 500 million streams in the same amount of time, showing you how big this GNX album is going to be in the long run. And on a side note, this tweet aged so crazy. Shout out to this guy, MF Doomstan1. On May 20th, 2023, less than a year before Kendrick released Not Like Us, he tweeted out a picture of both Drake and Kendrick saying, when one of them finally decides to press the button and do a direct diss, this app will turn into World War III between the Drake isn't a rapper people and the nobody listens to Kendrick in real life people. And the irony of all that, right? Because the first album Drake releases after this beef is an R&B album, which looks pretty good for the Drake isn't a rapper people. And meanwhile, it's getting destroyed on the charts by a 3-month-old Kendrick album, which also looks terrible for the nobody listens to Kendrick in real life people. Now, we're gonna jump into the charts this week because Kendrick completely blocked Drake from getting any new songs from his Sexy Sleepy Love Songs album into the top 5 of the Billboard charts this week. And Kendrick actually replaced himself at the number 1 position as Luther replaced Not Like Us, being number 1 on the charts. With that, Kendrick achieves the fastest accumulation of 4 number 1 hits on the Hot 100 amongst male solo artists in a lead role since Michael Jackson in 1987 to 1988. So Prince outlived Mike Jack, but Kendrick is both. In the last 12 months, he's had 4 number 1 hits, his first being Like That with Future and Metro Boomin, then Not Like Us, then Squabble Up when GNX first released, and now GNX gets its second number 1 song with Luther, replacing Not Like Us on that number 1 spot. And Kendrick keeps either tying or breaking these Drake records on the charts as GNX now joins Drake's For All the Dogs as the only rap albums released in this decade to have multiple number 1 hits. Drake on For All the Dogs had Slime You Out with SZA and First Person Shooter with J. Cole. First Person Shooter, they were talking about being as big as the Super Bowl. A year later, Kendrick is doing the Super Bowl with SZA. The 2 features, which were on those 2 Drake number 1 songs, and then Kendrick's number 1s off GNX were obviously Squabble Up and Luther. And you could see here the Billboard chart for this week. Luther's at number 1, then Not Like Us. TV Off's at number 4. Squabble Up is at number 5. All of them completely blocking Drake from hitting the top 5 with his new album. Give Me a Hug, which is the song where he's dissing Joe Budden and saying that if Kendrick takes the crown, all the ladies in the strip club will be twerking with dictionaries in their hand to understand Kendrick's music. That song hit the charts at number 6. I don't believe in the long run this is going to be the big hit off the album. I think it's just because of the controversy of what he was talking about in that record that, got it the attention to shoot up this high on the charts. I think the real hit off this album is going to be Nokia, which debuted at number 10 on the Billboard chart this week. That's not too bad. You could see the chart activity for this new album, obviously for any regular artist, would be amazing. For Drake, it's one of his worst performing albums on the charts, but again, you have to take into account, right? Drake is at one of the lowest points in his career. I'll give him this. I thought the album would do a lot worse. Think about the horrible summer he had, the horrible reception to songs like The Heart Part 6, Wagwan Delilah, his Sexy Red remix to BBL Drizzy, all his plot twist throwaway songs. It was really looking dark for Drake on the charts, and his next move was pivotal. Especially with this lawsuit with UMG, people were confused on he just threw Spotify in the mix into this lawsuit. Are they even going to promote this album? Are they really going to do their best to block this thing from doing the same numbers that Drake has put up in the past? And that would be a statement, right? He's the numbers guy. If he came out with weak numbers after the beatdown that Kendrick had on him in 2024, with Kendrick breaking all these chart records, it would speak volumes to, who's really at number 1, both commercially and critically. And Kendrick is still beating him, but these numbers aren't too bad. He has songs all over the Billboard Hot 100 Top 50. You could see every song off the album actually charted on the charts this week. But because they didn't chart too high, obviously the Courthouse Karen OV Hoes had to come in with their conspiracies. And you could see the points that make up how high a song will chart is basically divided between the amount of sales on iTunes that the song actually gets, how many times people are buying the song, how many times people are streaming the song, and then how many times the song is actually played on radio. Sales is in the yellow column, streams are in the green, and then airplay is radio play, and that's in the blue column. All these new Drake songs have very low airplay, right? Because they just got released. They just got sent to radio. Not all of them got sent to radio. Drake and his team and his label have to decide which songs they actually want to send to the radio. They decided to go with Gimme a Hug, so you could see that has had 3.7 million streams, or spins I should say, on the radio this week. And the OVHOs are coming in saying barely any radio play is an interesting takeaway from this. First it was, oh, they're blocking Drake on the streaming platforms. I debunked that in my last video. Drake was on all the major both R&B and rap and main playlists for Spotify and Apple Music. He was all over the homepages. They were saying, oh, when you search up Drake or PARTYNEXTDOOR, you can't find their album. I didn't have that problem. I showed you guys that in the last video. When the streams are low, they'll make any excuse as to why it's flopping. But now that the streaming numbers came in and they actually weren't half bad, now they have to turn to the radio play to say, oh, Drake is blackballed from the radio. That's not how it works. The radio's very old-fashioned. Songs take a long time to garner up more and more airplay, more and more radio spins per week. It's decided on a bunch of factors, right? The label has to invest in the song getting played on radio, and then people have to actively not shut off the radio when that song is playing for the radio host to be incentivized to play the song even more. It's a long process, and that's why you could see older songs like Shabuzi's song, A Bar Song. That song has been out for, I think, over a year at this point, and that's why you could see it has one of the highest radio spin numbers of any song on the Billboard chart this week, even though it was released a year ago. There's a lot of songs here that are getting more streams than that song, but that song is still getting a lot more radio spins because it's been out for a while. It's been worked on the radio for a longer time. This isn't some big conspiracy against Drake. It's just how the radio works. When your song is first released, it's not going to get that much airplay. If it's working well on radio, the host will be incentivized to play it more, and its spins will slowly start going up. Radio is very old-fashioned. This is a bad way to kind of look at the success of a song in 2025. So for Drake fans to try to make this the excuse as to him, being blackballed or his numbers not being as strong, just shows that they don't really know much about how the music business actually works and are kind of just desperate for any excuse. Like, look at this Lady Gaga Bruno Mars song, for example. 64 million spins on radio, more than triple the amount of Not Like Us, but Not Like Us is charting higher because it has almost double the amount of streams as that Bruno Mars Lady Gaga song. So what? Are the OVHOs going to say that there's a big conspiracy from the labels behind Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga to block Kendrick on the charts? It's just not how the radio works. And I thought these tweets were funny. I'm not going to show, the account's real name because they love to sue, but stuff like this, like they really don't get that when Drake was at the top, everybody ate. While the bot is at the quote-unquote top, nobody else is allowed to win awards. Nobody is allowed to chart. Nobody gets radio play. Nobody that doesn't suck West Coast D is allowed to coexist. Y'all voted for this, though. Like, bruh, they don't realize that Kendrick put a bunch of relatively unknown West Coast artists on his new album, got them all their first plaques, all their first chart entries on the Billboard charts, and he even performed AZ Chucky's verse on Peekaboo on the Super Bowl stage.
It's not enough.
Has Drake done that much for anyone from his hometown? Even when he does a collab album with the OVHO Sweatshop King PARTYNEXTDOOR, it's majority a Drake album. All the biggest songs off this project, the ones that are actually getting sent to radio like Gimme a Hug and Nokia, those are solo Drake songs. So miss me with this narrative. Also, you want to talk about, Kendrick dishing out awards or hit songs, whatever. He gave Mustard his first Grammy Award, multiple Grammy Awards, and he just gave SZA her third #1 song with Luther this week. Very ironically, her second #1 song was actually with Drake, Slime You Out. And you could see that Kendrick's monthly listeners on Spotify also continue going up, almost 1 million in a day. He's almost at 110 million Spotify listeners. He has the most of any rapper in history right now. And the two hip-hop artists that are gaining the most monthly listeners on Spotify per day are right now Kendrick Lamar with 900K per day and Doechii with around 700K per day. Not Drake, not no mumble rapper, not Playboi Carti, real hip-hop. But of course, the OVHOs are going to say it's the bots, it's the industry plants. There's always going to be an excuse.
It's not enough.
And now Kendrick breaks another record, becoming the rapper with the second most #1 songs ever on Billboard with 6 #1s after Luther just hit #1. And of course, Drake is the rapper with the most amount of #1 hits on the Billboard charts with almost double that, 14 #1 hits on Billboard. Kendrick is creeping up, man. 4 #1 hits in 12 months. Let's see where we're at in 12 months from now. especially if you get another solo album. And in terms of all the number one hits he's had, obviously we went through the ones from the last 12 months, like that Future and Metro Boomin, Not Like Us, Squabble Up, and Luther with SZA, but he also has Bad Blood with Taylor Swift and Humble from Damn. And even with this new Sexy Sleepy Love Song album from Drake, Not Like Us was still the most streamed song globally this week with 111.7 million streams. Last week, the OV hoes were saying, oh, it's just back at number one because of the bump from the Super Bowl, but now we're 2 weeks from the Super Bowl and it's only down 1%. And of course, The Weeknd had to sneak diss Drake again because his new album from this year, Hurry Up Tomorrow, remains the biggest Spotify debut for a black artist this year with 302 million, more than Drake and Party's album did this week. And in terms of rap albums that have had multiple number one hits on the Billboard charts, GNX is in crazy company. Aside from the different Drake albums like For All the Dogs and Scorpion, you also had classic albums like Tupac's All Eyes on Me, Speakerboxxx Love Below from Outkast, Get Rich or Die Trying from 50 Cent, Biggie's Life After Death, T.I.'s Paper Trail. That's a slept on album. I feel like people forgot about that album. Kendrick beats another Drake record, as with 8 weeks at the number one spot on the Billboard Hot 100 this decade, he now surpasses Drake, who had 7 weeks at number one on the Billboard charts this decade. But Drake broke some records too, with Nokia and Gimme a Hug both hitting the top 10 of this week's Billboard chart. He extends his record as the artist with the most top 10 hits in Hot 100 history, with 80 top 10 hits throughout his entire career. And with the final first week numbers for some Sexy Sleepy Love Songs hitting 246,000 in the first week, this marks Drake's 12th lowest first week sales number in his entire career. Views is at number one with over 1 million in the first week. Then you had Scorpion with 700K. You guys could look down the list. He's given us already 4 albums since 2022, and all of those albums are in the bottom half of this list. All of his other collab tapes have done more than this new PARTYNEXTDOOR collab. What a Time to Be Alive did 375,000 the first week. Her Loss did 404,000 first week. I think after the beatdown he got from Kendrick, these numbers aren't bad per se, but for Drake standards, I mean, you guys could take a look at this list. Like, these numbers are pretty low from him. That's why, to me, this is kind of a W, but also kind of an L, especially considering the fact that GNX last week sold almost as much as this new album did in its first week, and he's still blocking Drake from hitting the top 5 on this week's Billboard charts. But Drake now has 14 number one albums on the Billboard 200. He officially ties Jay-Z's record for the most number one albums in hip-hop history on the Billboard charts. But he actually beats Jay-Z's record of being the fastest rapper to ever do this. He's actually the fastest artist in general to ever amass 14 number one albums. He did this between 2011 and 2025, 14 years, and it took Jay-Z 19 years to accomplish the same thing. It also took Taylor Swift 16 years, so took Drake the shortest amount of time to accomplish the same exact thing. Pretty impressive for the OV hoes. Now, Los Pollos, one of Drake's biggest glazers, actually pointed out, remember how I mentioned earlier, Kendrick was the first rapper in 12 months to have 4 number one songs on the Billboard charts with Luther, Not Like Us, Squabble Up, and Like That. Drake did technically accomplish the same thing back in 2018 with God's Plan, Nice for What, In My Feelings, and Sicko Mode. However, he wasn't actually credited as one of the artists on Sicko Mode. So technically, he only had 3 songs with his name attached to them that hit number one in those 12 months. But I guess really it was 4, considering he was definitely an artist on Sicko Mode. But again, he did this all with club songs and TikTok hits. Like, you let Kendrick do this, a conscious rapper do this with only conscious songs.
It's not enough.
Kendrick's also the first male solo artist in the 2020s to replace himself at number one on the Hot 100, and it's the first time he's ever done this in his career, as Luther replaced Not Like Us. And obviously, with Kendrick breaking all these records, it's only natural for Drake to try to outdo him and now break records in court, because obviously, if you guys have been keeping up, Drake is suing Universal Music Group, the same label that houses both Drake and Kendrick Lamar, for releasing and promoting Not Like Us. In the lawsuit, Drake or his legal team is claiming that Drake feels the allegations in Not Like Us were not only false but dangerous and put his life and reputation on the line. He's suing UMG, claiming that they're more interested in making money than protecting their artists, saying it was quote-unquote corporate greed over safety, even claiming that the song pointed to real-world consequences like the shooting that occurred outside Drake's Toronto home after the song was released, and that UMG was obviously responsible for these dangerous things happening to Drake as a result of the success of the song. So to give you guys an update on the lawsuit, because some back and forth has just happened between Drake and UMG's legal team. Basically, Drake's legal team was asking to get this lawsuit kicked off right away. He wants to start gathering evidence, which is a step called discovery. Discovery is like the investigation phase of a case where both sides get to dig up documents, emails, and other proof to build up their arguments. Drake wanted the court to move quickly. He scheduled a pre-trial conference, which is a meeting where the lawyers and the judge plan out the case, and that was set for April 2nd, 2025. And now just the other day, UMG's lawyer sent a letter to the judge asking to pause the April 2nd pretrial conference and stop discovery from starting. They argued that Drake's case might not even be strong enough to continue, and they wanted more time, claiming they'd file a request to dismiss the case by March 17th, 2025. Basically, they want more time to basically try to scrap the entire case from even happening. And they're saying that Drake had already agreed to drop some key parts of his original claims in the lawsuit, so the case may not even hold up in court. UMG's attorney wrote in their filing saying, the plaintiff, Drake, has agreed to withdraw certain key allegations in his complaint. This statement is UMG's way of suggesting that Drake's case is weaker now because he's backing off of some of his original accusations against them, like maybe the specifics of how UMG promoted Not Like Us, or the extent of their alleged knowledge of the song's false claims. UMG used this to argue that delaying the case would be fair since the lawsuit's foundation might be shaky. They also hinted that discovery was quote-unquote premature or too early, and that taking more time would let them challenge the case's validity before moving forward. But now Drake's legal team is pushing back hard against UMG's delay request. They're basically saying, UMG, you can't stall this. Like, you're trying to dodge the truth. So the document that came out from Drake's legal team basically argues a couple important things. So number one is that UMG's request to delay is quote-unquote shady. Drake's lawyers call UMG's move a quote-unquote transparent attempt to obtain a stay of discovery, and essentially they think UMG is stalling because they don't want to face the evidence Drake might uncover in the discovery phase, like emails or internal documents showing UMG knew the song's claims were false but pushed it anyways. The letter specifically notes that UMG's request quote-unquote circumvents the court's rules, especially the federal rule that governs discovery timelines, and accuses UMG of trying to manipulate the process for their own gain. They argue that this tactic is particularly egregious given the public scrutiny of the case, and they include, as an example, Kendrick's Super Bowl halftime performance on February 9th, where he actually performed Not Like Us and smirked at the camera while rapping Say Drake, I Hear You Like Them Young, intensifying the controversy. They also are emphasizing that they want to stick to the schedule. They urge the judge to deny UMG's request to delay the April 7th pretrial conference, April 2nd, and they emphasize that the current schedule is fair and necessary. They argue that UMG should comply with the court's established rules and timelines, stressing that delaying would unfairly hurt Drake, who's eager to clear his name and get justice, especially after the high-profile nature of the rap beef and its aftermath. And then they again explicitly mentioned the Super Bowl performance as a reason for urgency, stating, plaintiff believes it is necessary to proceed with discovery now because of the recent developments, including Lamar's Super Bowl performance, which has further amplified the defamatory impact of UMG's actions. Basically, they don't want UMG to keep promoting the song, and they're scared that Kendrick is going to take it to higher and higher levels. They also think UMG's motives are suspicious, basically accusing UMG of trying to circumvent or go around the court's process to protect themselves, calling it a deliberate delay tactic to buy time and avoid scrutiny. They argue that UMG's request isn't about fairness, it's about dodging the hard questions about their promotion of Not Like Us. Drake's lawyer's letter cites past legal cases to show that courts typically reject delay requests unless there's a compelling reason, which UMG has failed to provide. They also suggest UMG's actions are part of a broader pattern of prioritizing profit over artist safety, tying that back to the original lawsuit's accusations of quote-unquote corporate greed. The document adds, UMG's motion fails to justify its request to adjourn, especially in light of the fact that UMG's conduct has been wildly condemned as evidenced by recent public events like the Super Bowl. They also argue that the discovery aspect of this case is crucial for Drake. They emphasize that Drake needs discovery to prove his case. detailing how it would allow them to investigate UMG's internal decisions like marketing strategies, communications about Not Like Us, and whether UMG knowingly promoted false and defamatory content. Drake's team believes UMG's refusal to start discovery shows that they're hiding something, and they want the judge to compel UMG to cooperate fully. The document highlights that without discovery, Drake can't fully expose UMG's role in the song's viral success and its impact on his safety and reputation, especially in light of public events, again like the Super Bowl performance, amplifying the controversy. It states, discovery is necessary to uncover UMG's complicity in promoting allegations lacking the slightest factual basis, as plaintiff, aka Drake, has already suffered irreparable harm, including physical threats and reputational damage exacerbated by UMG's actions and recent public amplification at events like the Super Bowl. They really didn't like that Not Like Us was performed at the Super Bowl. And finally, the bigger picture is that Drake's lawyers paint this as a fight for fairness, arguing that UMG's delay request isn't just inconvenient, it's an attempt to drag out the process, making it harder for Drake to get justice. They want the court to see UMG's move as a tactic to protect their profits over Drake's well-being, tying it back to the original lawsuit's corporate greed claim. The letter also references the broader cultural context, noting how the Super Bowl halftime show and the ongoing rap beef have kept these allegations in the public eye, which makes swift resolution even more critical for Drake to restore his reputation. It specifically mentions the court should deny UMG's request to adjourn as plaintiffs need to proceed with discovery is urgent, given the ongoing public harm and UMG's failure to address the reputational damage inflicted, particularly highlighted by Kendrick's Super Bowl performance. To put it simply, UMG was basically stating, we should delay this whole trial because we're going to try to get it dismissed anyways, especially because Drake's legal team was allegedly, according to them, trying to take back some of the claims they made in the initial lawsuit, and then Drake's legal team clapped back and said, we're not trying to take away any of the claims we made in the initial lawsuit, and if anything, it's only getting worse. Drake's reputation's only getting worse, and with things like the Super Bowl, this rap beef is only getting amplified. The allegations made in Not Like Us, the song that UMG published and promoted, are only getting put on higher, bigger platforms. They're only trying to push back this case to make it harder to come to a resolution, and we only need to come to a resolution and move this case forward as fast as possible so that Drake's reputation doesn't get dragged through the mud even further. And to me, it's really crazy to think that Drake's legal team is so keen on fighting this, really. Like, it's one artist, yes, a massive artist, but he's going up against a giant corporation, a corporation that owns 30% of all the music on the Billboard charts right now. A company that owns Drake's music, that's doing business with him. Even if he wins this lawsuit, what's his next move? Is he going to go independent? Is he going to sign back with them and thinks that he'll have more bargaining power with them for his next contract? What happens if he does win? Because they've played the same game that they played with Not Like Us to promote Drake's music and every other artist's music. Every artist has used bots at one point in their careers. While it might not be ethical, when he digs into these UMG documents or what they present in court, it's going to show that they were pushing these same buttons, playing these same games to promote Drake's music when he was in their good graces years ago with albums like Scorpion. Is it only wrong because he claims that Not Like Us has false accusations? Because then you could look at Family Matters and say, that song also had a bunch of false accusations against Kendrick and his family, and UMG still published and promoted that song. Even in evidence in Drake's lawsuit, you could see screenshots showing Not Like Us was promoted by UMG, but Family Matters was also on that same list of songs they were promoting on their website. So is this Drake's attempt at trying to get them to silence the song? I mean, obviously they're more confident than ever that they're either going to win this lawsuit or that the judge is going to dismiss it because they keep promoting the record. They license it to be played at the Super Bowl. The CEO of UMG, Lucien Grange, was high-fiving Dr. Dre as Not Like Us was playing during the Grammy ceremony and Kendrick was going up to receive an award for it. They're requesting this thing be postponed or dismissed due to the lack of evidence that Drake has. Drake is emphasizing that it's crucial that he actually goes into their internal documents to be able to find data to actually move this case forward, meaning that he doesn't have enough on his own likely to build a strong enough case. But if he does go in and do some digging, he's going to find that the same promotional tactics they used on Not Like Us have also been used on Drake songs. So what does he stand to gain here? What is he actually trying to fight? Will this help artists in the future? Will this destroy the safety of lyrics in the future from any track that major record label publishes? Let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.